Can we speak point just tell by point? You didn't do what I'm saying.
Can we get one vote?
Alright, team opening government. Can I get preferred gender pronoun speaking on?
The lad?
And he.
Preference.
Opening opposition?
Carlota speaking first, no preference.
Paula, she.
Closing government?
Eran, he.
Naomi, she.
Closing opposition?
First Daniel, no preference.
And second Alex, no preference.
Excellent.
Yes.
Right. Without further ado, I'd like to call the Prime Minister to speak on favour of opening government.
Can I start with the live streaming and everything?
Stream is done there. Oh, smile.
Hi. Okay, so these days we're facing a problem, an old, ancient problem. The Jews around the world, even though they're a group that is under risk, that they are being targeted because of anti-Semitism, racism, and so on, even though they are in this position, they don't have anyone to protect them. In many cases, even their own government won't protect them when it comes to racist attacks against them. I'll explain about this problem further in my speech. First, I want to speak, so we as a government obviously support that the Israeli intelligence will help Jewish people around the world from that aspect, help them protect themselves and keep them safe. We understand that it means that Israel will need to put money for people that are not official citizens, but I'll explain in my speech why it actually fits the purpose of Israel as a state, as a Jewish state, and it also what these communities want and need, and what is their situation exactly. So let's start with the criterion. When do I protect someone, defend someone, even using force to protect someone? When he's under my, when he's like a child under his parents, or someone that, when he's under my, don't have the word. Anyway, when I'm a citizen, when I need this help, okay? I need this help. I need to need someone else to protect me. I can't defend myself, and I have someone that sees himself as responsible for me. In these cases, he'll take responsibility and protect me. For example, a state will send an army to protect her citizens. So, what is the situation here? Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I got it right. So it's people who have Jewish parents are the ones who we need to speak for.
Right. Okay. Yeah. When we speak about Jewish people, the people that define themselves as Jewish because they're part of a Jewish community, or their parents are Jewish, right? That's the definition. So I'm going to explain. Firstly, what is the situation of Jewish people? What's anti-Semitism? What's the problem exactly? Why does the need for protection, for special protection? What is the purpose of Israel as a Jewish state? And how these communities see themselves in front of the state and in front of their situation. So, firstly, let's explain a bit about Jewish people. Jewish people are coming from a different culture. They have a different religion. They have a different language. They even do things from right to left. That's the reason I said here. We write from the other side. We sit as a government on the other side. That's the truth. We're coming from a different nationality. Okay? It's very different to other nationalities. It's very unique. Also, when it comes to religion, they eat specific things. It makes them different. And when someone is different in society, it already puts him in a problematic way. You're in a class, you're the only Jewish kid. It puts you in a different position. Now, historically, Jewish people are facing anti-Semitism and racism, even from their governments. The Holocaust is a good example, obviously. Programs that happened during the years, legends about Jewish people having whatever, horns and stuff, eating Christian kids, terrible things, okay? There's a long history of anti-Semitism, things that happen, things in culture against Jewish people. Even government themselves are sometimes against the Jewish people inside them. In Iran, for example, they deny the Holocaust. They definitely have something against these people. Now, we see in our world that terror attacks happen against Jewish people, like in France and other places, just because they're Jewish. More than that, we see Nazis, what happened recently in the United States, in different countries, Nazis, not only citizens groups, but also governments. We see parties in countries that are sometimes even proud to be anti-Semite. So there's a big problem, special, unique problem for this population. They're facing a bigger need for protection, and sometimes the people that should protect them don't see it, and sometimes they are biased and don't want to see it. Now, what is the Jewish state and how it sees itself? Israel as a state sees itself as the home of the Jewish people all over the world. It sees Jewish people from outside of Israel as citizens, even though they're not citizens. For example, if you're a Jewish person and you come to Israel and you want to move to Israel, you don't need to do anything. Okay? You get citizenship automatically. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how much you earn. If you are Jewish, you get a place. Why? Because for thousands of years we had nowhere to go. We didn't have any home, any house, and we faced a lot of racism, and a lot of people got hurt from it. That's the reason the state of Israel was established to begin with, and that's why we were giving citizenship automatically, because these people need it, and also when they're not coming to Israel, even when they're outside of Israel, Israel sees them as kind of citizens. Now, it's not that only that. Israel is very involved in what's happening to these communities. We know the events, we hear about them in our news. Also, our parliament really listen to what Jews around the world have to say, so we're very connected to them. So we as a country see these people, we see the Jewish people as citizens. There's a need for protection, we see them as citizens. Now, how these communities see themselves? These communities feel like they're under Israel. They, for example, culturally they're connected to Israel. They give a lot of money to Israel. Charity, sometimes they give the state money, so that they put effort into the state. They're also very involved in what's happening in the state. In their local news, you always see news about what's happening in Israel. They have connections, family connections, personal connections to Israel. They also help Israelis that come to their communities outside. If they come, for example, here when we're coming to Tallinn, there's local Jewish community that will take care of us because they know we'll take care of them when they need us. We're there for them. So they see themselves as under our protection. So that's the picture we got. We have a group that is under risk, that is being targeted, even in our days, and we see examples every week, literally. It's also something that happened historically many times. So we have a group that needs protection, needs more protection because our government doesn't help her all the time, and even when she does, it's not always enough. Because of this gap, we need someone that will feel it. Israel as a state that sees herself as responsible for the Jews is the right person to do that. They do it with will. They see themselves as the country of the Jewish people. These communities themselves see themselves as under the Jewish state. They look for them for help. They're connected to this state. And for all of these reasons, we definitely support the intelligence, the Israeli intelligence, to help these people around the world that need this help. And for these reasons, please propose.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a timekeeper?
Can you do a timekeeper thing?
Oh, do you want me to keep trying? Okay.
Oh, it didn't do this. Alright, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister and call upon the Leader of the Opposition to make the case for opening opposition.
Will you go for me?
Of course.
Okay, so
Wait.
What?
My apologies.
No, do it. This is scary.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the criteria that opening government has set to actually help these people is firstly that they need help, which is not a strong criteria, okay? A lot of people need help, and that doesn't mean that we have to employ resources for our own country to help them. And the other reason they have given us is that they share some kind of culture. Well, I'm going to explain why exactly means the duty, why exactly legitimizes the duty of a country towards the citizens, why does this happen, in what situations does this happen, and why this is not the case. Okay, so even though they share a big culture, which we are not against, and they have a closer relationship with these communities than maybe other countries with other communities that have also sharing some cultural reminiscence, like other cultures, okay, this is not enough. Why? What actually means that I have a duty to these people. Okay, so we have a sovereignty, right, which is the thing that allows me to control some people that are under my rule, the government. Okay, so when I am under this principle, I have a duty towards the citizens, and the citizens have a duty towards this government. So for this, which is a very simple principle, right? I put the laws, you follow them, and I keep your stuff. Okay, this has been undercovered under several things towards history. Running history, right? First we have monarchy and this kind of stuff that actually work as some kind of cohesion of community. And now we have the form of nationalism. So, nationalism may seem just as sharing a culture, but it's actually more deep than that. Okay, it's who you share your life with, it's who chooses the destiny of this country, who is allowed to vote in this country to actually have this sovereignty legitimized. So the only duty to a country is towards the citizens that A, live in their country, B, follow the rule of law, third, answer under their government, and for contribute within the country. So regardless of the connection or cultural connection that we may have with another communities, this is not enough to justify the spend of inner resources of my country in these communities, because they don't share a future, they don't have a saving within our country, they don't follow our rule of law, they don't live in our country, they don't not allowed to vote, they are not sovereign of this country. I do not have a duty towards these people. So we think that gets easily denied, despite the thing that they may need help and we may share more culture and have a closer feeling towards them. Which I think he explained it really well, right? We don't need to increase the feeling that we have towards them. They take care of them, they are concerned by them, but there is no real reason, and it's not practical, as Paulo will explain to you later, to actually increase this kind of connection and increase the kind of help that they are already receiving. So, the other thing we hear is that, well, they need to be protected, but we have two kinds of things here. If it's a very unstable country, okay, and they have problems and internal problems, it's really complex to protect them, right? But if Israel actually starts intervening there, probably the situation will get worse and will actually get more backlash against the Jewish communities. So it will actually make it more difficult to keep these people safe, and you will need more military staff. What will happen in the countries which are not the case? For example, Paris and USA and all these kind of countries. Well, in these countries you have a very strong mechanism without the democracy, without the law, without all the structures that these Western liberal democracies have to totally protect these kind of communities. We don't think that they are in much need of help, or that Israel could give them more help that they are already receiving in protecting these kind of attacks. We have a lot of narrative in these countries against the discrimination, the anti-Semitism and all this stuff, and in the countries that we don't have that, they are very complex, and the intervening of Israel will only make things worse. So you actually, you don't have the duty to help these people, but actually if you try to help them in those cases, you will actually be counterproductive. Yeah?
What happens if a Jewish person is in another state, not in his own state, and he is in risk? Would his state take the risk and save him? Well, that depends
if he has the citizenship or not. If he does, well, maybe you help them, but towards the established methods, right? Like consulate and this kind of stuff. Maybe he could, call consulate, is called that? Consulado. Okay, yeah, okay, fine. So you may follow the right standards that they are already set if you're a citizen of the Israeli government. Like you say, Israel is more than open to receive people who are Jewish and feel Israel to live there and actually protect them. So I think it's more than enough, and it fulfills the duty that it has towards the citizens quite well as it is. We don't see first the duty, second the necessity, and third the pragmaticity of this measure. So, why people within Israel may see this as a bad thing? Okay, so we agree, okay, that there is a very strong feeling toward the people who are Jewish and don't live inside Israel. But at least as an Israeli person, I may probably have a closer relationship with my neighbors, with the people I work with the people I make my life with, okay? So suddenly that my country is spending these kind of resources in helping people who are not actually within Israel, instead of helping people in Israel which are not in the best of the situations, that's what my partner Paulo will explain later, will create most likely an imbalance and a backlash within the Israeli population, right? Because now you're spending the much needed resources that you need in Israel to intelligence and so on to actually help people that are not living with me, that are not sharing exactly my problems, because yes, we share a lot, but we don't share exactly the same problems, because where you live, 10 years old, a Jewish in the USA doesn't have the same problems that a Jewish has within Israel state, and that's why we think this is not the best. Yeah?
As The way that the Jewish diaspora works is that Jews are spread all over the world and they have family in all different countries. Jews in Israel feel as if Jews in other countries are their family, are their brothers, and Israel has, and they therefore have a necessity to protect them.
Yeah, but as I told you, there are established ways of helping them that are, I think, going to. You have the need to protect them. That doesn't mean that the government has the duty, as Israel has the duty to protect them. This doesn't mean that it will be pragmatically positive to protect them, because it may have some bad consequences that my partner will talk to you about. So, yeah, maybe the people will need the field to protect them, but probably not enough to damage their own protection, to damage their own country, to think that you are losing some protection within the place you're living in, the people you share your current and your daily problems with, towards these other people who are maybe living in the USA, having a better quality of life, and so on and so on. So in the end, we think that yes, you may have this need or this feeling of protection, but it wouldn't be sufficient to actually think that you may sacrifice the protection that you should have within your state. So what have we said so far? That it is not a duty of the government, because it's not answer to the sovereignty, to actually defend or protect these people. That the need of help is not enough, that the nationality means more than a shared culture, so therefore they are not sovereign from this land, which is basically right, and therefore I don't have the duty to protect them, but even if I protect them, this wouldn't be... Okay. I didn't hear the thing.
It's okay, I'm going to clap, okay? Can everyone hear this? This
Yeah.
thing doesn't do
Okay.
it. Okay, cool.
Right, I'd like to thank the leader of the opposition, one deputy prime minister, to make the case for opening.
Mr. Speaker, 2 points in my speech. First, we're going to explain why this is the obligation of the State of Israel to these Jewish communities, and second, we're going to explain why it's so important to the State of Israel, but before that, 2 points of rebuttal. So what basically we heard from OO is two things. First, about the criteria. They say that the obligation of the state is only for who lives in it physically and obligates to the law system of the state. But please note that what they basically say that the right of Jewish for protection is actually based on his passport and document. Okay, but please note that at the analysis my partner said, explain you few things. First, that every Jewish around the world is a potential citizen of Israel, because legally every Jew around the world can migrate to Israel and automatically be a citizen from day one. Okay. Second thing, please note that these communities have a lot of effect on the state of Israel. Okay, and terror against these communities is equal to terror against the state of Israel, and on that I'll explain in my points. Second thing, what we heard from OO is the claim that other states will protect them. Few things about that. First, other states not always have the abilities and the knowledge to implement this kind of protection. Second thing, they don't have the interest to do that, because it's required a lot of resources to protect the whole community together, and all the synagogues and all the community buildings. And the third thing, not all the countries are Western European democracies. There are some countries that are not aware for anti-Semitism and racism that take part in this country on their land. Okay, 2 main points. First, why is the obligation of the State of Israel to these communities? So first, and as my partner said, Israel sees every Jewish around the world as a potential citizen, and it doesn't matter if he defines himself as a religion or not religion. Actually, Jewish is not chosen to born Jewish, and even if you say that you have no religion, you legally can migrate to Israel and be a citizen. Second thing is the importance of the Jewish communities, and this is crucial. Okay, because please know that Jewish communities around the world are live together. They are donating money to Israel. Okay, they are help to fight boycotts and acts against Israel, and they keep all the Jewish in the foreign countries together and help also Israeli Jews. So these Jewish communities are really important to Israel because they keep the Jewish together. Because, as my partner said, they are potentially target for terror attacks, and these communities are experience violence. They experience anti-Semitism. They experience racism, even if they don't define themselves as Jews. And this is the real reason in engagement to what OO said. This is the real reason why Israel should protect them, because when you attack these communities, it's actually act against Israel. Okay. Second thing, please note that no, thank you. The Jewish communities need that because in cases that the other countries were failed, because of the reason I said in the rebuttal, because they have no abilities, they have no knowledge, have no knowledge, and they have no intelligence before. Okay, and please note that it's also good for the state itself, because if the state of Israel have this knowledge about this potential terror attack, okay, the state itself, the foreign state itself, does not want this terror attack to take place in his land. Okay, and last thing on that, please note this is the goal of Israel to protect Jews, because this is the definition of the state of Israel, to connect Jewish and to be the home of Jewish around the world. Please note that Israel also subsidizes trips of Jewish people around the world to Israel, just to let them feel connected and let them feel that they have a home around the world, even if they live in a state which they experience some anti-Semitism and racism. Before I go, second.
Right. But the fact that Israel always, between the lines, says, if you don't give me what I want, I'll just send some Mossad agents to gun down the people preventing me from it, makes it much harder to make long-term security deals with, for example, Arab states, because they don't trust Israel. They can't trust that Israeli citizens aren't just going to come in and just intervene violently.
Okay. Israel knows that the countries are obligated to basic safety and security conditions for Jews. But please note that as my partner said, Jews Jewish communities are unique. They are not just travelers that walk around the street. They are identified with the Jewish, with the synagogues, and they are a potential target for many attacks. And not always the host land have the ability to actually protect them. To my second point. Why it's so important for the state of Israel? So, as we said before, we know that there is racism and anti-Semitism in the world. Israelis that live in Israel also know that, okay, and also know that there are lots of protests and violent protests around the world. So basically, right now, Israelis are not feel 100% safe in any other country which is not Israel, because they know that anti-Semitism is actually they can find it everywhere. Okay, so no, thank you. So we believe that this is important to Israel to let their citizens feel safe everywhere they go around the world. Okay. And please know that there is some terror attack that took place in some area, like happened in Thailand or in Greece. Israelis are afraid for years to get back to this place, and this is the job of Israel to let their citizens to feel safe everywhere they go. If the other states cannot allow themselves this security, in the long term, we believe that avoiding terror attacks in foreign countries affects in Israel, because the main goal of terrorists and terror attacks is to hurt Israel. Jews are connected to Israel, and when you attack Jews community around the world, you actually basically attack Israel. Okay, so this is the reason why the same terror groups that attacks Israel inside Israel are also looking Jewish people around the world to attack them to actually hurt Israel, to let Israelis feel unsafe wherever they go. So this is our engagement to OO, and this is the right criteria, because this is the obligation of Israel to its citizens as to its Jewish. Because if Israel wants to protect itself, it also has to protect Jewish around the world. And from all reasons, really proud to propose. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister and call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to conclude the case for opening opposition.
Okay, first I want to make some important points of rebuttal in this debate. Opening government has talked about that every Jewish person is a potential citizen of Israel, and we are agreeing on that, but the main problem is that they are not really real citizens, or they are not really in an equal situation as the Israel's people living are. In the sense that these people are not really paying taxes to the Israel states, they are not really helping the state, so we consider that you as a state don't have the same direct with those people that are living in the diaspora than with the people that are really supporting you. In the second point, you talked about the anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitism in other countries, and we agree that that's the problem. But the main problem is that if you act against the population that is committing that anti-Semitism activities, these people are going to be more and more anti-Semitism, and specifically in those countries that you have told that are not really democracies, because in these cases, that state, the state of that country where they are committing anti-Semitism activities, cannot really act, because in many cases it doesn't have the power enough to do that. And we say that if there are terrorist groups that are attacking a particular group of the diaspora in one country, is that country the one that has to act to protect the population, but not another state, like the case of Israel. And now I want to talk about something that I think is really important, and it's about, we agree with you in one main point in this debate, and it's that Israel is the home of you people. And why? Why is that? We want to talk about Israel because Israel is a symbol of Jewish population, and we are aware of that. And as Israel is a symbol for Jewish population, it's a symbol so valuable that we have to protect it. We have to protect Israel's state, because Israel was born as a symbol of the Hebrew culture, and it has been born as a place where an identity that has been historically attacked in so many times has to be respected. And in many cases, Israel as a state can act as an international lobby to protect Jewish people around all over the world. So the main problem that we have is that we should protect Israel as a symbol if we want to protect people in the diaspora. And what we're going to show that is that these kind of actions are going to attack directly to the existence of Israel, are going to make it be in a worse international situation. And we don't want that, because we want Israel to survive as a country that can protect their people's identity and their people's rights all over the world. Why is this going to affect Israel's international situation? Well, first, Israel is already in a really critical situation. Since it was formed, its existence has been really questioned, specifically by Arab countries that are its main neighbors. And in fact, Israel has had some wars during the last 50 years because of it, and it has had to defend its national existence in so many cases. And at the same time, it has been bad considered by the international community because of the Palestinian conflict and because of its attacks to Palestine. So it's not really having a really good international view by most of the countries. And it has been many times attacked by international organizations in the protection of the rights of people and the protection of the rights in war. So, in fact, there's all the time resolutions against Israel in the Security Council of the United Nations that in many cases don't progress just because the United States is betting them and is acting with his veto against them. So, why is this important? Israel has already some problems in its national defense. It has to defend its own territory from other countries, specifically Arabian countries, with its intelligence service, and at the same time it's facing terrorist attacks by terrorist groups like Hezbollah or, for example, like Hamas. So, it's important for Israel to defend itself first. And the main problem is that you have opened some different conflicts all over the world. If you don't focus in your national conflict and you start focusing in a lot of different conflicts in the diaspora, you're not going to really be capable of fighting all those
at this point.
But one of the main things that I want to talk about, and I think it's specifically dramatic in this debate, is, okay, imagine that we have problems in the diaspora. Imagine that there's a particular group that is attacking a Jewish group in the diaspora. Where is this going to happen? Who are you going to attack? I think it's the main point, because by a question of probability, those countries that you are going to attack, or those are those countries that have the biggest Jewish communities, the countries that have more Jewish population. So what are these countries? I'm talking about the case of the United States of America. I'm talking about the case of Argentina and other Latin American countries. And I'm talking about the case of some countries in Europe, like for example, France or the Netherlands. Why is this important? Because when you attack a population in this country, there are parts of the world that have a lot of groups that have, for example, extremist and anti-Semitism group that can potentially attack this kind of population. But the main problem that you have is that you are attacking citizens of those countries, and that for that country, those citizens that are anti-Semitism have the same value as the Jewish community that they're attacking. You are attacking their population. It doesn't matter what their idea says. You are attacking their population, and so that is going to make you lose their support, or having less support from those countries that have been historically really important for the existence of the state of Israel, and that they remain allies in the world, and that you need to conserve with you. Your point.
Yeah, we agree with you. The first thing we need to do is to protect ourselves. We're not involving in any case in other countries, only when there is a need. If your citizen was in another country and he wasn't safe enough because the country doesn't keep him, wouldn't you do something about it and send someone to keep him?
I consider that it's first my population and then the population that is in other countries, I've told you, because they don't have the really same connections. And the third point that is really important is that it makes the image of Israel getting worse in those countries that are historically situated as a neutral country, as a country that has not really a main opinion on this conflict. So these countries are going to see that it's a really stir of tension, and that in any moment, if a part of the population attacks a person that is Jew, Israel's state can act against them. And that is going to make them be afraid of the state, or maybe taking more, maybe not being as, maybe not wanting to support Israel as they were supporting in the past, specifically because the diaspora of Jewish people is really wide, and it affects most of the countries in the world, and specifically because Israel is a country with a really powerful army, and it has a lot of ways to defending itself. It's a country that has nuclear weapons, and so it's a country that could be powerful and that could be dangerous if it wants. So me, as a neutral country, that I have no really a main opinion about Israel, I'm going to change my view on it, and I'm going to start thinking and consider it a dangerous country. So the main problem is that Israel, that is a country that needs to survive, and that has had historically a lot of problems to survive, is going to lose its opportunity to survive, and it's the main thing that we need to protect diaspora. That's why we are proud to Europeans.
I'd like to thank the deputies of the opposition and call upon the extension team of the government to make the case for the government.
Quick framing to this debate. Both sides, opposition and government, agree upon one thing. Jews should be protected somehow. On the opposition side, they say the intelligence should not intervene in other countries. Obviously, in the government, we support it. But the real question is, we believe that Jews should be protected, and the main question is how we do it more effectively without harming more interests of Israel. If we prove in that point, we can actually win this debate. Our point on that is cooperation with intelligence is crucial to treat the source of the problem in an effective way. The main problem in this debate is that there are countries like Arab countries or really right radical wing countries that not actually help Jews that are actually has violent acts on them, and therefore we should intervene because the country itself that should protect the Jews which are not in Israel just don't stand on that mission. 2 points of external rebuttal. So, opening opposition asks why we should help someone who is not living at Israel. Here are few practical interests that we should do it, and this is also another extension. A, Jews that lives outside of Israel actually support financially Israel by big donation. Actually, a lot of Jews that has businesses contribute to Israel financially by donation every year. This is one reason you actually need to protect them, because it's like, by the way, and it's important it's like actually they're paying taxes by those donations. B, pro-Israeli Jews, which are actually sometimes well educated and have just actually serve Israel as ambassadors by being a good citizen to Israel, and this is also another reason we should protect them, because they help our diplomacy. You didn't say this practical. You didn't say these practical reasons. I'm sorry. Okay. C. Army recruitment. A lot of Jews that live outside of Israel feel they need to come to Israel to recruit to the army because they feel commitment to Israel, because Israel is committed to them. Here are three main reasons which are practical who help Israel interest.
For that.
Second point of rebuttal. Again, against open opposition. Why should we open new frontier and fight in new frontiers? Actually, it is not true. Why? A, it is not new, since any attack, and this is something which open government did say, and which wasn't engaged, the fact that if there are terrorists who attack Jews in other countries, this attack is aimed towards Israel. The main thing is to arm Israel. Therefore, the criteria is not true. They are aimed to arm Israel. Therefore, it is not open a new frontier, an open a new fight. B. By the way, there is no problem of human resource to protect with our intelligence. Most of the intelligence is supplied first by like computers and so on, and there is no actually practical problem to protect Israelis. I will take from first.
Okay, so the thing is, when they attack another communities to actually attack Israel can actually answer to that group of terrorists without having to intervene strategically and intelligently in that country.
No, you are not engaging in the main principle. I'm sorry. I'm just saying, if you are helping Jews that living outside of Israel, but you get donations, you get recruitment for the army. I just said it in my rebuttal. If you are not helping them, they won't be obligated to Israel. Therefore, we have the answer. No. So, to my point, cooperation with intelligence is crucial to treat this problem of anti-Semitism in an effective way. Here are two scenarios which are important to understand. The first scenario is countries which cooperate with Israel. In this scenario, we don't have a problem, because obviously if there is a country that cooperates with Israel and let Israel to work in their intelligence inside, those cases are not relevant. Here are the cases which are relevant to this debate, and here is another important extension, is countries which don't cooperate, but there are Jews who actually help Israel interests that live there. Those countries are, as I said, sometimes Arab states and right-wing states which consider Jews don't really help Jews. The authorities there don't cooperate with Jews because they don't see Jews as they are not consider themselves as a weak minority group. Therefore, they seem to them from the outside perspective there is no racial problems. So. The question is, how can we secure those Jews and also by that secure Israel interest? And the best alternative to do it is by by cooperate with the Israeli intelligence. What is the best alternative and the only actual alternative that we can actually deal with the problem? Because most of the Jews that live outside of Israel in those states, for example in Arab states, have more trust in Israel intelligence than the local authorities. Most of the local authorities won't actually cooperate in the same way like Israel intelligence. This is important situation to understand. So, if we have that mechanism that we understand that in order to secure those Israel interests, you need a trust with authorities authorities to actually to achieve three main interests. Jews that actually will recruit to the army in really high probability later on because they will feel committed. Be financially by donating every year to Israel. And see overall make Jews in worldwide feel obligated to Israel, and if there is a conflict that happens, they will feel more obligated to help Israel in every diplomatic aspect they can. For those reasons, I beg you to support.
I thank the extension speaker of the government to call upon the extension speaker closing opposition to make the case for that team.
So, a recurring problem on the side of opposition so far has been that they failed to address what is actually the real root cause of anti-Semitism. If you look at it historically, it is, as most other kinds of bigotry, been material conditions. The largest, most violent expose of anti-Semitism was in Nazi Germany, and that was also right after Nazi Germany had been the most unstable economy in the Western world. The ruling classes here use Jews because they're an easy scapegoat to distract from their own failings. The logical conclusion, of course, is then improve the material conditions, and they won't need a scapegoat. Which is what this motion, with this breaching of trust between states, ultimately destroys. Because we know that wealth statistically makes you less likely to be racist, less likely to be anti-Semitic, all these things. And by inference, wealthier countries are also typically less anti-Semitic, less racist. And that is why we need to have long-term trade, long-term dollar diplomacy, which Israel is a very good position in the Middle East to do, in order to in the long term solve this problem. Right, so that's why my speech will focus on stability and wealth creation. There will also be some other points. First off, it destabilizes the region as a whole. Already covered this a little bit, but they only covered in terms of neutral countries. You can also make the case that the political class of, for example, Arab countries can be appealed to, because you have to distinguish between the incentives of normal people and the political class. The political class wants to stay in power. That's why they sometimes use Jews as a scapegoat. If you then instead go in and say, look, if you just leave Jews alone, we'll open a nice tech factory, we'll get your people lots of jobs, we'll invest lots of money here, and that'll give you more funding to achieve your political goals and to achieve your, your continued repression, which is unfortunate, but the fact of the matter. And then, they can take their usually state-owned media and tell it, go focus on something else than in the policies of Israel, distract the common people, and we can all, avoid these anti-Semitist attacks happening in the first place, because there won't be this propaganda machine against them. But of course, you can't do that if the political class constantly knows that if I let more Jewish businessmen in here, then there's a constant risk that any of them could just open fire at my local politicians at any time, because they have this Jewish defense doctrine. They might not even be Israeli citizens, so there's no way for me to know when or where these Mossad agents will show up. So that makes it impossible for me to make this trust and to make this trade that in the long term solves these problems. It's no coincidence that the Middle East is one of the poorest regions in the world and also one of the most anti-Semitic. Moving on. Yes, sir.
Reality check. Rich countries like the United States, like France, have anti-Semitism and racism inside them. In history, we see programs in Russia, Jews killed Jesus, stuff like that. It never was connected.
But that's because bad times create this on the moral. You're right that there can be individual connections, but if you think that the political class of the United States or Russia is as anti-Semitic as Qatar or Saudi Arabia, then you're the one who needs a reality check. Yes, it doesn't mean that material conditions are the end-all be-all, but overall is the biggest explaining factor. Second, this policy, fair warning, I don't support these things that I'm about to reiterate, I'm just reiterating them. This policy implicates Jews in Israeli policy, including Jews that don't have Israeli citizenship, that don't send money back to to Israel, because the anti-Semites don't distinguish. And besides, how would they? How would you know that which Jews have a political, have an Israeli passport and which don't? So, for example, when you had the conflict in Gaza for a few years ago, in Denmark, where I'm from, there was an attack on the local Jewish school that said, "No peace in Gaza, no peace for you Zionist pigs." They were attacking people with no relation to Israel, who barely spoke Hebrew, who went to a Jewish school and that was it, but they didn't speak Hebrew, they'd never been to Israel, some of them, but they were targets because these people know that there's a political cooperation between Israel and between these local mosques. And of course, that also means that ruling classes in less democratic countries like Denmark, for example, Qatar or Saudi Arabia, know that if you want to pressure Israel, you can pressure the local synagogues. But of course, if there wasn't this policy, they wouldn't have any incentive to do it. If they wanted some sort of concession from Israel, attacking a synagogue would bring them no further because Israel does not see it as part of their priorities. So you're painting a target on the back of these local Jews, including the ones that don't have Israeli passports. Because let's be clear, if you want to extract Israeli citizens in another country who are under attack, then that's completely fine within the system that every country operates within. If you want to extract non-Israeli citizens, that is when you're breaching the system that we put in place. And that is what the real differentiating factor between the two benches here. No one is saying you can't extract Israeli citizens. But, there might be people who don't want Israeli citizenship who might be part of this. But because of this policy, you can still extract concessions from Israel. You're still painting a target on the backs of these Jews who, in fact, by choice, don't associate with Israel. So in the long term, you make them less secure as well. Third, it divides domestic Israel in second and first-rate citizens. Remember, Israel is, yes, a Jewish country, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have sizable non-Jewish minorities, somewhere between 20 to 25, I don't remember the exact numbers, I'm sure you guys know them. And these families live in this country, they pay the tax, they do the military service, all these things. They live basically as Jews, as Jewish citizens, but they know that if a Jewish compatriot goes and says, my family is being harassed in Qatar, please help them extract, the Jewish government will leap to their defense right away. But if they do the same thing and say, my family, who's not Israeli citizens, like the Jewish guys, who are also not Israeli citizens, are being attacked, they're just going to respond, tough. That creates a second and first-rate citizen, which of course is a pretty straightforward way to make these people cynical about the country that they live in. That's why you have, in the long term, support for Arab nationalist parties, because they, part of it's because they know that Israel doesn't see them as equals. So they don't really support a cohesive state. They vote on parties along ethnic lines, which doesn't move the country as a whole forward. So there's also a dimension of Israel proper to consider this policy, how they're affected. Because it leads to a less cohesive state, it leads to a less stable state, which in the long term, destabilizes not just Jewish communities outside of Israel, but also people in Israel, which is of course where most Jews are and where most of Israel's interests are. So that should really be the main priority of this debate, if you're talking about it from the viewpoint of Israel. Is the main interest of Israel is Israel. So because you're putting a target on Jewish people's backs, and because you're destabilizing the region, preventing a long-term solution, please oppose.
I'd like to thank the Extension Speaker for opposition and call upon the Whip Speaker from Government to conclude the case of closing government and the government bench performance.
Okay, in this debate we see three major clashes. The first clash is the legitimacy of the Israeli government to intervene in these countries. The second clash is what is for the best for the Israeli citizens. The third clash is the diplomatic relationships with the countries that we're going to be involved in. Before I do that, I want to have two or three short points of rebuttal. The first point is the conflict with the Arab nations is not because of poverty in their countries. It is because of a UN decision in 1948 that they did not agree with, and since then, till now, they have been vying for the destruction of the Israeli state. It is completely absurd for the closing opposition to try to blame anti-Semitism in countries on the decisions of the Israeli government. It is not a legitimate reason to attack a Jewish citizen in a country because A, the country might be poor, which has nothing to do with the Jewish citizens, or because the terrorists in this country might not agree with the Jewish state. They're trying to defend. They're trying to say that because they're trying to explain the reasons why why there's anti-Semitism and not, and they're completely off clash because we're trying to protect the people who have been victims of anti-Semitic attacks. And to the point that it divides up Israeli minorities, there are the attacks on Jewish citizens. There are attacks on Jewish citizens around the world because of anti-Semitism, and therefore Israel has an obligation towards them, which was explained very thoroughly by opening government and also by my partner. It was explained very thoroughly why there's an obligation specifically to Jewish citizens around the world, specifically because we consider them to be potential citizens and that we have an obligation towards them. And therefore, if there's an anti-Semitic attack, it's not going to divide up the citizens in Israel who aren't Jewish, who feel like they aren't being protected, because they do not have a problem with anti-Semitism out of Israel. The people who have a problem with anti-Semitism out of Israel are Jewish people, not Arab minorities or Christian minorities. That it's completely irrelevant to this debate. And now on to the points. The first clash is the clash about legitimacy. As was explained very thoroughly in my first opening and closing government, there's legitimacy for the Israeli government to intervene because as far as the Israeli government sees it, and the people of Israel sees it, which is in direct answer to opening opposition who tried to say that the people of Israel are not going to want to spend resources on these other Jews. The people of Israel and the government of Israel sees all of the Jewish citizens around the world as people who are under their protection. Israel has taken on the obligation to protect these people. They are potential citizens, they are their brothers and their sisters, and they feel connected. They are their literal family in many cases. People who live in Israel have family all over the world and want to know that their government is going to protect these people, even if they do not currently live in Israel. Israel is even willing to say, which is an answer to closing opposition, that we're even willing to protect Jewish people who don't necessarily support everything we do. We also have Israeli citizens who do not support everything the Israeli government does, but we still are ready to protect them because because we know that their countries are being negligent in their protection, and therefore we have to protect them. And this is on to my second point. This is on to the second thing, which is basically what was our substantial extension on opening government. We said that while opening government explained why there's an obligation and why they're considered potential citizens, we explained why this specific mechanism works and why the existing mechanisms in place and the local governments are not doing a good enough job protecting their Jewish citizens. Now, as my partner explained, in many cases, not only in Arab countries, in many cases like in the US or in France, while Jews are a minority, they're not considered a particularly weak minority. They're relatively middle class. They don't have a lot of other problems, and therefore their claims are less legitimate when they claim anti-Semitism. And this Iran explained. He explained that because the local governments are less likely to take their claims seriously, the only person they're going to trust to take their claims seriously are the people from the Israeli government, the people that the Israeli government sends who know how to identify threats against Jewish people, threats against Israeli people, and where the local governments are negligent or simply do not have the tools to be able to differentiate between different types of attacks and different motivations behind attacks. The Israeli government can do this, and therefore these people are going to be more cooperative and are willing to talk about their experiences, which is what we said, which was our substantial extension, and therefore they are the only people who can properly deal with the problem.
Yes. Yeah, but why do we have to protect those people in the diaspora by using violent actions and not just by asking those countries to respect human rights?
Thank you. The countries should be. We agree. The countries should protect the rights of all the citizens. But the problem is that they don't, which is why we have this motion. If it was perfect and there were no anti-Semitic attacks, or if every single anti-Semitic attack in the world was dealt with properly by the local governments, we would not be having this debate. The fact of the matter is, in these countries, the anti-Semitic attacks are either not considered anti-Semitic, or they're not dealt with properly, or they simply do not care because they do not really care about the Jews of the country. That is why we have this debate. And like I said, the people in these the Israeli government is the only people who can actually protect these people. They take their claims seriously. The Jewish people, because they feel connected, because like Iran explained, they draft into the army, they donate money, they come to visit, they feel connected. The vast majority of Jews around the world feel connected in some way to Israel. They're the people that are going to cooperate, are the people who are going to take their claims seriously. They don't trust their local government because until now, the local government has done nothing to help the Jews. Because unlike other minorities who may have lower social and upper classes, the Jews normally do not and therefore are not seen as weak. Sure.
Yeah, but there is no literally obligation. Maybe there is a strong connection with so protected, but if we explain largely why it's not the most effective way, what is diplomatically bad.
Thank you. You do not give any other better alternative to a better solution. We said that the reason that we need this is because right now there is no mechanism in place that helps these people. That's the reason we're having a debate. We explained to you why this mechanism is the only mechanism that works, and opening government explained to you very thoroughly why, for Israel, this is what we need to do to protect the Jewish people, to protect the people. Like even you stated, Israel needs to protect itself and needs to continue and deserves to live. And and both sides clearly proved why A, there's a connection and there's an obligation there, and why for the Israeli government they feel obligated and they feel like they must take these Jews under their wing and protect them. And we explained thoroughly why there is no better alternative, because if there was a better alternative, there wouldn't be a debate here. And Iran explained very clearly why in a lot of the cases the local governments have no interest to help these people because they do not consider the Jews to be a group under attack, even though they're very often targeted because they're Jews, or because closing opposition said, because there are anti-Semitic people who are angry at the state of Israel and therefore attack Jews in other countries. We do not think that's a legitimate reason to attack Jews because you're not happy with the actions of the state of Israel, and it's very important to make that clear. So, like I said, our substantial extension is the fact that we showed you exactly why this mechanism works, why the Jews will only trust the state of Israel to help with their problems, because in the past they've been the only people who protect them. Israel is always there to open their doors to accept Jews, and the Jews around the world know this. The Jews know that no matter what happens, Israel is going to have their back, and therefore this is the only mechanism that's going to work, and we strongly beg for you to propose.
Okay, I'd like to thank the governing whip and call upon the opposition whip to move the case for closing opposition and the opposition to the bench as a whole, and also the debate as a whole.
The primary confusion from this debate has emerged from one very fact, and that is that both sides, at least the existing three teams, have been very confused about what are they actually defending, and how is our stance radically different from their stance. Actually, the other way. How is their stance very different from the status quo? So what we essentially want to establish is that under the status quo, where we don't have this doctrine, it essentially means that as any other countries, we want to honor the citizenship of our people through legal means. What they want to do is that they want to use paralegal and extra-legal means, even if it means through violence, to bring about their interests. And that is what we believe is going to be fundamentally destabilizing. This is not just saying that we want to protect Israeli people. That's not just meaning that Danish government wants to protect Danish people. That makes no controversial claim. What it really does is that it's an act of aggression, suggesting a lot of things that we're going to tell you in a second. So what has opening opposition done, right? They argue that the doctrine is first of all illegitimate on the grounds that we should not be supporting with funds people outside the country because they're not Israeli as such. Then they second of all argue that it's unnecessary in the first place because the existing legal system is in place. In other words, they argue that there are no benefits to be accrued under their model, and therefore we should rely on the status quo. What we argue, quite the contrary, is that not only is it going to have no benefit, it's going to actively reinforce violent attitude towards Jews. In other words, it's going to cause more harm than good, and therefore undermine the very legitimacy that it is premised upon, right? So implicit in their argument, the legitimacy of the argument is that in order for it to be legitimate, it has to reach the desired consequences. They have suggested that they have provided mechanisms. We're going to tell you why they haven't in any ways whatsoever, and it's a big lie. So we say that the doctrine is not uncontroversial because they're suggesting the Israeli Jewish people should be protected, but also that it is at any cost, even if it means through violent means. So this is an active declaration of violence, and we say that we need to discern between the intended effects of the motion and the concrete contingent effects of what's actually going to happen, and we see the dynamics of other countries realizing that this is an official doctrine. So we say that the state has one pragmatic decision criteria, and this is going to be the overarching clash of theme, and we're going to raise 4 points below it. Will it make Jewish people more safe or more vulnerable in the long run and in the short run as well? So what is the argument really made by this case? And therefore we argue that there's a substantial lack of analysis. They've offered the unreflexive analysis suggesting that by adopting this doctrine, it will by definition of fiat make the Jewish people more secure. But really, they really offer no real sufficient analysis on how this doctrine can in concrete circumstances be effective to help these Jewish people. Let's take some concrete examples. We live in Jewish communities that is in a foreign country. We say that Jewish children are being marginalized within the school. How does the doctrine help these people? Are we going to adopt the principle, torture him and do whatever through violent means and then make him comply? That's an act of violence. Are we going to bribe these people to make sure that they suddenly comply so they become part of the Jewish community? What about in Arab countries where Jewish people are being marginalized? What are you going to do? Are you going to conduct terrorist attacks or other paralegal acts to make sure that they comply and they fear the Jewish people, right? Because through legal means, we say we can negotiate on the diplomatic means. That's the status quo. What they're suggesting is that we should rely on extra and paralegal means to engage in our outcomes. And we argue that they have really offered no proper analysis of the relationship between what are the concrete mechanisms. So that's a lie. But now let's talk about the actual backlash. What is the actual harm that's going to happen? And we think about this more reflexively. 3 points that we would raise as substantive contribution. First of all, how this is going to undermine the possibility of establishing long-term relationships. This has been alluded to by the opening, but we provide more analysis and linked it also to economic relationships. Second of all, we also talk about how this will render all Jews in this doctrine, and it will implicate them, and how they will harm them in different ways, which we believe is illegitimate by implicating people that do not necessarily want to be part of this doctrine. Third of all, we also established that it creates domestic fragmentation because there's also a large minority, and this discourse implicitly undermines the relevance of these minorities and suggests that they're worth less. I'm going to substantiate to reflect what my partner said. But before I continue, opening.
Yeah. Please note that Israel is already investing resources to support Jewish abroad, and as we said before, it doesn't create second-class citizens.
Yeah, this is just for investments, and investment doesn't have to be like the condition of Jewish. It's just Jewish people donating through their corporate networks or networks to Jewish companies. There's nothing violent about it, nothing controversial about it. Just like Chinese people expect all the donate to Chinese. This is not under this motion. I mean, this aspect of violence has been totally neglected. I don't know why open opposition allows them to neglect the aspect of violence and through other subversive means to end this goal, right? So we say that the possibility of the first point about how this is going to be bad, right? We say that by adopting such doctrine, it only displays an aggression towards Arab countries or other areas in which Jews experience discrimination. It suggests that we will violate the sovereignty of other nations through paralegal and extralegal means if it is necessary, in order to put the interest of their own people as a first order condition, right? Usually when other people, Danish people are in other countries, we argue that if you violate the laws of those countries, of course we're not going to start violating their sovereignty. Here we argue that we're going to bomb them, we're going to do whatever, we're going to abduct people, whatever it takes to make sure that the Jewish people are happy. We argue this is not going to make them more happy, right? Because once people realize that this is the stance that the Jewish community has towards the rest of the world, especially the Arab people, it's only going to make them more galvanized to create backlash and to target them and make them a scapegoat, right? There's been all these different discourses and these different conspiracies about Jewish people controlling the world. What's going to happen? You're only going to reaffirm these ideas that there's a systematic plot to target people that are not Jewish because they're dangerous. So that only reinforces anti-Semitism. We do not, in other words, accord them with the equal respect they deserve, and it only creates more resentment. And in the long run, it's going to be bad. Now about the economic aspect, right? We did not say that the economic conditions that is a direct, immediate cause of anti-Semitism. What we argue is the economic conditions and intervening variables. And very often when we see that there are specific conditions under which economic conditions are bad, there's more reason for them to make it even worse. So while we had an opportunity, no thank you, no more POIs, it might be really bad because in the long run we cannot establish more homogeneity. Trade creates homogeneity, creates relationships, it creates similar languages. And these things is usually what mitigates the changes. The Ottoman Empire, the Chinese Empire, we have the similar language, similar metric system, similar currencies, and that makes it more similar, and that makes anti-Semitism, other forms of racism less viable. That's why in Ottoman Empire there's this racism in comparison to the present day, right? The second part implicates Jews that are outside. So there's also just the whole backlash from what I just addressed now. It's going to have a backlash on people more generally that don't want to be part of it. It means that they're going to be rendered vulnerable, and that we argue is illegitimate because individuals can be considered Jews, but if you want to take them in Jews and make them more vulnerable, that we argue is an act of violence towards the individuality of these people by implicating them. That we argue is not legitimate for the Jewish state. They have a right also to call these individual Jewish people to make their own decision, that they don't allow them to do that, and then it's not making them exposed to violence. And the last part is about how the domestic fragmentation is going to bubble up. There's been quite fragmentation within the Jewish community in Israel. What we're really going to do now is that we're not going to make it even worse. We're going to tell people that you guys are second-rate citizens, that Jewish countries, that Israel is a Jewish country for Jewish people. That's not going to be good, and it's not going to be good outcomes, and it's only going to make it all worse off. For all these reasons, there's a lot of backlash. It's not going to reach the intended consequences for these reasons that Baker proposed.
I'd like to thank the speaker from opposition. I think all for that debate. If you wouldn't mind going outside now, shaking your hands, become friends, and continue to have a coffee.